Welcome to the Comedy Reset Spotlight. This is the place to be if you want to hear from some of the most innovative and exciting comedy creators from around the globe. On this podcast, you'll hear from a variety of guests who are pushing the boundaries of what comedy can be. If you're looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas, this is the podcast for you.
Episode 1. New York stand-up comedian and founder of Joke Soon, Rob Cioffi.
When did you first start doing stand-up comedy? My first time doing stand-up comedy was in May of 2006. What made you want to become a stand-up comedian? It's actually a funny story. I've always wanted to do it, but I had a friend who was getting a divorce and who had another friend who was a musician. And the musician friend was very successful meeting women. And my other friend was quite jealous. And, musician friend said, well, it helps to be a musician. Women kind of like that. And my other friend had no musical talent at all. And the musician friend suggested to my other friend, why don't you get a headshot, be an actor? It's almost as good. All you need is a headshot. So he went and got a headshot. And I guess me being the third wheel and always wanting to do comedy, I decided, well, I think I'm going to become a comedian. That's the short story. There's more to it, but that's pretty much it. Who were some of your influences? My biggest influences were probably my family, my parents, my father especially, who loved to tell jokes. If I was going to, basically the the most influential comedians were the ones that I worked with initially, the local comedians in the Long Island area. And then, of course, the legendary comics like Seinfeld or George Carlin. Those are sort of the guys I tried to emulate. The two comics that I worked with most closely, who probably had some influence on me, certainly had given me at least some technical prowess with comedy, would be Bob Nelson and Al Lubell. So Bob Nelson and Al Lubell would be the short answer. What was your first time on stage like? My first time on stage, I had laryngitis. I had actually gotten, I was a shy person. I was not a very extroverted person, especially as far as public speaking went. I was not a good public speaker. And I signed up for this, and 2 days before the gig, I got laryngitis, psychosomatic laryngitis. There was no physical reason I got it, other than my brain said, body, we're not going to let him do this. And I couldn't talk. By the time the gig came around, I had gotten part of my voice back, but it sounded very rough and froggy like this. And I did my whole set. I actually went up and did my set like that. And all I recall is there were a lot of comics on the show. And after the show, or after I got off, a lot of the comics came up to me and said, wow, that was amazing. You've got a really great voice. You're going to be, you're going to get a lot of work because you're unique. And I thought, wow, okay, maybe hopefully I'll stay like this forever. Like an idiot, I would think that. Long story short, I didn't. And It took me months and months to get their respect back. What's your favorite joke? I don't really have a favorite joke. I like being in the moment, making fun of what's in front of me, or playing with what's in front of me. Not making fun of, but necessarily making fun. What's the worst heckler experience you've ever had? I had some college kids, some college guys who were pretty rude to me. I don't remember all the particulars. It wasn't pleasant. And they weren't only, I guess they were, I were clean, and I think that was an issue for them. And maybe I wasn't that good, but it's besides the point. It's not how you behave at a show. Don't heckle people. What's the best gig you've ever had? The best gig I think I've ever had was at Danny's Upstairs. That was Danny Aiello's club in Hoboken. Danny Aiello loved me. I love people. I love telling this to people. I love dropping his name. That's what I get all the time. I love to drop his name. But I can recall there was a show where the comic before me did very, very well, and I was very intimidated and went up and literally crushed crushed the room. Literally, not literally. I just crushed the room, and it happened to be another comic that I had a lot of respect for, who was local to me on Long Island. I overheard him on the phone. He goes, "Cioffi, I'm watching Cioffi crush. He's crushing." And I was probably high off of that for a while. What's the worst gig you've ever had? There have been a number of them. I'm thinking of one where I had 3 people in the audience, and I was working with another comic, the headliner, and we were like looking at each other going, what are we doing? I mean, what are we doing? And we decided to go, and I remember it was weird. Instead of being on the stage, I kind of went on the floor and just stood in front of their table. It wasn't the worst gig, I suppose. It was more like, conversational than it was show businessy. But it's rough. I've had enough rough experiences. I've bombed enough to not have one particular one stand out. How do you deal with stage fright? My secret, my way of dealing with stage fright, and I do get it. I do get stage fright, is I reframe it. I try to say to myself, okay, you're feeling stress, you're feeling your adrenaline's going, your heart rate is up, you feel like running, but it's not fear, it's excitement. I'm excited. I'm excited to be on stage. It is exciting. The whole thing is exciting. And, I've got myself to a point where I can pretty easily convince myself when I'm feeling that way, if I'm overwhelmed by it, that's what I'm feeling. What was the most unexpected response you've ever gotten to one of your jokes? I was doing a nursing home gig. This is in the middle of the day, doing a nursing home gig. And I had been hosting, and then the show went on. I brought up the first comic, and then I started doing a little bit more in between the next comic, before the next comic, and right in the middle of one of my jokes, I hear, "Oh my God," from the audience, And there was a guy who was face down in his linguine. Literally, his face had fallen to the table, who had a heart attack, and he was dead. He literally was dead. They thought he was dead. Fortunately for him, he had one of those implanted defibrillators, and it woke him back up. They had an EMS come, and we stopped the show, and they took him away. And I remember the headliner telling me, I went to him, well, what do we do? He says, well, we're going on because we're going to start the show once he's gone, because they haven't given us the check yet, and I'm getting that check. So, which is testament to him. The show must go on, especially when you haven't gotten paid yet. How do you prepare for a show? How do I prepare for a show? I'll tell you, it's probably similar, if you can imagine it, to the montage in Rocky 4, where instead of me exercising and running and chopping wood and doing sit-ups, I'm just looking at my jokes on index cards over and over and over. I'm looking at them standing up. I'm looking at them sitting down. I'm looking at them laying in bed. I'm looking at them upside down. I run up a flight of stairs and throw my index cards up in the air. It's kind of what I do. That's my prep. What's the best advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy? The best advice I've ever gotten was probably not to take stuff too seriously. Have a thick skin. Sometimes audiences aren't going to like you. They're not going to get you. They're not going to get your sense of humor. And that's okay. Sometimes you're going to have an off night. You're human. Don't beat yourself up about this. And again, I started pretty late in life doing this. Don't compare yourself to someone who's been doing this for 20 years or 10 years when you're starting out. You go at your own pace. That was probably the best advice, because I wanted it all now. Like a lot of comics, when they start, they think, "Oh, I'm going to be on TV in 6 months, and I'll have a sitcom in a year." Well, yeah, right. Sure you will. Sure you will. Act as if you will, but chances are you won't. So take it easy on yourself. What's the worst advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy? For me, the worst advice that I've gotten is not to write things down. Be extemporaneous. If you're not being yourself and improvising on stage, you're not naturally funny. I don't buy that at all. And I've gotten that from comics. They kind of berate me because I write down every word. I know every word I'm going to tell in a joke before I ever get on stage. I don't buy it. It's not my thing. And hey, if it works for you, good for you. But it does not seem to work for me and a lot of other comics. What would you say is the biggest misconception about stand-up comedy? I think the biggest misconception about stand-up comedians is they are terribly unhappy people, that they have to have a terrible tragedy. Yes, they do. Lots of them have had. I mean, you look at Richard Pryor or Rodney Dangerfield, you would not want their childhoods. But I had a relatively good childhood. Well, maybe not. It was compared to those guys, it was great. But if you're happy, it's important to be happy in life. Be happy with yourself. If you're miserable all the time, what's the point? Getting on stage and being, if that the only thing that brings you happiness is 20 minutes, half an hour, several times a week. Yeah, come on. That's no way to live. Get some therapy. What do you believe is the key to success in stand-up comedy? I don't know what the key to success is. If I knew what it was, I would be successful. Hard work seems to be something that is consistent across most comedians. Having TV ready looks helps, that's for sure. And I think, knowing somebody is probably the bottom line. Someone who can get you, I don't know, somebody who can get you a deal. That's what you want. What do you think is the biggest obstacle that stand up comedians face? The biggest obstacle stand up comedians face is themselves. I don't believe that. I think the biggest obstacle is there's too many comedians and not enough spaces. There are only so many places for comedians. There's only so many slots at the top, so many slots at the middle. It's so many people want this to work for them. There are so many talented people out there. So how do you stand out? Again, hard work. 90% of it is hard work, but it's that 10% of luck. It really is. 10% of luck. I know the adage, the harder you work, the luckier you get. But in show business, you really got to work hard. You really do to get lucky. What do you think sets stand up comedy apart from other forms of comedy? What sets stand up comedy apart from other forms of comedy? The low barrier to entry. That's one. All you need is the chutzpah to get up on stage, stand in front of people and tell jokes. You need a few jokes. Help if you could write them. Other forms of comedy don't require the kind of audience feedback or the real time. You don't really get the real time audience feedback if you're writing a sitcom or a film. And if you're doing improvisational comedy, that's really not a solo affair for the most part. It's, unless you're Mr. Bean, maybe, but ultimately it's a group effort. You are by yourself. You're out there by yourself. It's another thing. Most TV shows or films are written with help. People aren't on their own. Not that you can't write stand-up comedy jokes with help. You certainly can. Obviously, I run a support group. Is it supportive? I don't know. It's a meeting place for comedy creators to work on their jokes together, called JokeZoom. But other than that, I mean, it's really kind of a solo. Once you're up there on stage, you're by yourself. What are the benefits of stand-up comedy? The benefits of stand-up comedy: the fame, the fortune, the adoration of your fans. Well, that's the benefits of the 1% of comedians that are at the very top. For the rest of us, for me, I can't even speak for the rest of us. For me, it's the creative endeavor. It's a combination of writing a joke, uh, coming up with a joke, writing it, formatting it, perfecting it, and then putting it out in front of an audience and getting the reaction. And when I get them to laugh, that's incredible satisfaction to me. Just one joke will do that. It doesn't even have to be a whole set. If I got one new joke and that happens, I love it. What's your process for writing jokes? Well, I'll come up with an idea and then I'll play with the idea. I'll kind of make lists is one thing, mind maps. I'm not a big mind map guy, although I'm a computer guy, and I do have software that mind maps, and I'll do mind mapping when I'm feeling geeky. But lists mostly, trying to find connections, and then in the editing process, start looking for opportunities for some of the basic comedy techniques and elements. So, like rules of three, exaggeration, parallelism. I love. It's a big thing that I like. Uh, those things I look for. What's the most important thing for a stand-up comedian to remember? The most important thing for a stand-up comedian to remember is where the exit is. Always know how to get out of there fast. Other than that, remember your jokes, remember your set. I guess that's what I would say. Probably. The Alamo. Remember the Alamo? Yeah, I would say that's the most important thing to remember. And remember to keep a sense of humor about yourself. You're not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. Nobody's going home and thinking about your jokes for weeks at a time as much as you are, whether you did them well or not. What do you think are the best techniques for dealing with hecklers? The best way to deal with a heckler, ignore them. That's my advice. Just ignore them. There's no real reason to be giving them any attention at all. Now, obviously, um, if there are persistent people, typically they want to be part of the show. It's pretty simple to just say, "Hey, I heard what you said. Very funny." Um, and if you can come up with something funny, obviously you have the microphone. The other technique is really repeat what they say. If they say something to you, repeat it back. Gives you a second to think about it. And then if they're still going to be a pain in the ass, you just basically get the audience again, to take your side and make them hate him. Just make them hate the guy. Just say, hey, all these people here want to watch a show. They paid money, and you're ruining it for them. You schmuck. Don't do that off the bat, though. In my opinion, be nice. Ignore them. That's the best technique. Ignore them. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that stand-up comedians make? The biggest mistake, I guess, is under preparation. If you don't prepare, I think you should take every gig very seriously, whether it's a paid gig, a high stakes gig, a high visibility gig, or an open mic. Treat them the same. Be a professional. This is a job. It really is a job. It takes work and effort to do it well. And aside from that, I think people tend to put themselves in situations, and not everybody, but a lot of people will put themselves, they feel like, oh, I've got to do a half hour, or I've got to get onto this stage, or I'm going to move to LA, or don't be chasing waterfalls. Okay, go where whatever that song says. Just do nice and slow, easy. Nice and easy. The turtle, be a turtle, a funny turtle, not a hare, not a rabbit. Be a turtle. What is the best way to learn stand-up comedy? Back in my day, the best way to learn stand-up comedy is to do it. Get up there and do it. My daddy threw me up on a stage and I had to learn how to do it. He didn't show me nothing. Then he drowned me. Now, I think taking a class is, a lot of comedy clubs have great classes. It's a good start. If you're interested in doing it, do it. I think you should treat comedy as an ongoing educational experience. You can always learn something, study other comedians, take classes, learn how to learn screenwriting, sketch writing, take improv classes. Be like actors. Most good actors are always taking classes. They're always working their craft. And in comedy, I don't think is much different. What do you think is the best way to improve as a stand-up comedian? Well, aside from taking classes, like I just said, the best way to improve is to get up on stage as much as you can. Again, I've seen comedians who were just plain awful, who put their mind and effort into getting on stage no matter where they could. Every place they could, they were on stage. Every open mic, every private event, parties, they would ask people, hey, could I do a few minutes at your party? Or, I've known a few people who have actually just stood in public places and done their stand-up. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And again, I'm thinking of 2 or 3 people that were just awful. They were just, I couldn't watch it. And then not seeing them for a while, and then go, what happened to you? What'd you go to the crossroads? Would you make a deal with the devil? Were you Bob Dylan? No, they weren't that good, but they've got a lot better. And again, it comes from being on stage. That's it. Ultimately, the audiences will make you a better comedian, or you'll end up not doing it. What has stand-up comedy taught you about yourself? Stand-up comedy has taught me that I am special and unique like a snow. No, I'm not. I think what stand-up comedy has taught me is I got all right, I'm going to say it. I got balls. It takes balls to do this. Never had balls. I was always very timid. I still am very timid in most cases. It takes balls to get up in front of people. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of doing it. I am very proud of doing it. I'd like to do it more. But it's scary too. But it's not scary. It's exciting. See how I did that? That's how that works. What motivates you to keep performing stand-up comedy? What motivates me to keep performing stand-up comedy? Well, I'm not really performing that much since I started being Mr. Joke Zoom. But I love stand-up comedy. I love being around people who like to laugh, and I love the creativity. And it is kind of cool when you're after a show and people are leaving and you're standing by the door to have people say, wow, you did a really good job. I love that. That really will keep me going. That will keep me going. And I think maybe getting paid once in a while helps. That helps too. What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about doing stand-up comedy? I would say just do it. Just sign up for an open mic, try it out, just get through that. Get through that experience. Look for an open mic, a comedy open mic. Usually if there's a comedy club by you, they'll have an open mic night. If not, go on Facebook. A lot of Facebook groups for comedy. Just look for your local area. The other thing is you should take a class or at least work with a comic. Maybe your cousin's a comic, or your uncle's a comic, or your nephew's a comic, niece is a comic, or whatever. Ask them for advice, but mostly just get out and do it. The other thing I would recommend is Judy Carter's book, The Comedy Bible. Everyone should read that. It's really good. Okay? It's really good. It's not everything you need to know. It's not going to make you funny in and of itself, but it covers a lot. She's on point most of it. So that's a great thing. Go out and get the book, the new Comedy Bible, because Judy doesn't make as much money from the old Comedy Bible. So get the new one because we want Judy to be happy. And get out there and do it. Is there anything you'd like to add that we did not cover? Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I've been your host, Rob Cioffi. Don't forget to laugh today. It's good for you. Comedy Reset Spotlight is a podcast that brings you today's freshest and funniest comedy creators. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to hear more.